Let's delve straight into healthy eating. I hope for many of you, when you buy your food, this is how it kind of comes, because this is how food should be bought. It shouldn't be bought from supermarket aisles. The sections which look like this is where our food should come from. Now, you can't do a talk on nutrition or wellness or weight loss, diabetes, blood pressure, anything like that without talking about the healthiest populations in the world. We all think that we live long, healthy lives, but overall we don't. Native populations always outlive us, and they don't have access to emergency medical care. If they get a serious infection, they probably would die from that, but they still outlive us, and they live very basic. Now, many populations like these have been studied around the world. It's harder now because there's such a big influence from different cultures. You know, you get fast food places everywhere now. These are pictures provided by the Price Bottinger Nutrition Foundation, which was a doctor and dentist that travelled the world looking at indigenous populations. This is a picture from my honeymoon, so a Maasai jumping up there. But what you can see straight off the bat is these people are extremely healthy and have not been to a dietitian. This chap would be consuming a diet very rich in calories from saturated fats, and you can't say that he needs to lose weight. This is not a young fellow. This is a guy that would probably do well on any sort of professional wrestling team. So these modern guidelines don't create people like this. So without going through all the detail, what you need to understand is populations around the world that are healthy share certain things. They do not farm their food in the way we do. They do not spray their crops with carcinogenic pesticides. They do not inject their animals with hormones. They do not have animals standing from life to death in their own feces. So automatically the food is very clean. We have to know our sources of food, or we buy organic. That's all. It just means clean food. Okay? Anyone who's in retirement age or above would have grown up on a diet which was basically chemical free, which was essentially organic. Okay? So it's not a quirky new thing. But what would vary between the populations is their climate. What was the environment they grew? So if I summarise that in basics, the populations that live generally very far north and south of the equator essentially had snow on the ground, or at least for part of the year, if not all of the year. So their access to fruits and vegetables and grains was very limited. So good studies looking at Inuit Eskimos, they eat pretty much nothing but red meat in the forms of wow meat and blubber. All the saturated fats, hardly any fruit, sometimes a berry, sometimes they'll eat the contents of a seal's stomach to get some vegetation, but essentially it's meat and fat. And one of the best studies ever done on Inuit Eskimos was a 40-year study, and they didn't find in 40 years a single instance of heart disease of any nature, cancer, diabetes, osteoporosis or disease of the gallbladder. But if you said all I eat now is wow meat, your doctor would probably freak out. Okay, but that's what these populations are meant to eat. They're not having any lean sort of chicken salads or anything. Now, when you compare that to populations which were closer to the equator, you generally find the animals a little bit leaner, so they would have less fat in their diet. They definitely wouldn't cut the fat off. Populations would eat all the animal, including the organ meat. Organ meat is, if it's from a clean source, is one of the best food choices you could ever make, but we just don't have it nowadays so much, which is a real shame. But populations along the equator would have much leaner sources of protein, so they eat less fat. They probably would have vegetation most of the year round, so they'd eat a lot more vegetables. They'd have fruit for periods of time through the year. It's very unusual to find fruit for 12 months of the year unless you're deliberately farming it. So that's why I'm not actually a big fan of the 5 pieces of fruit a day. I feel it causes a lot of problems. And if you're, in general, this is a generalisation, if you're white-skinned, Northern European, then 5 pieces of fruit a day is not always the best choice, and it can lead to diabetes. I've seen many patients who are diabetic purely through fruit consumption. I'm not saying all populations, but it makes sense. We're not designed to have that. But also when you look at these populations, interested, they've never found a healthy population that lived long-term under vegetarian conditions. Now, I'm very pro-animal welfare. I think we shouldn't be cruel to our food source. I think it's barbaric. But coming away from that, there are things we can only get from animal-based proteins and animal-based fats, and I feel they are essential for our diets. One of those is dietary cholesterol. We need cholesterol. I'll do a small section on that, about cholesterol specifically, and I'll do quite a bit about fat, but we require cholesterol, and you cannot get them from vegetables. So, in my house, I have loads of vegetarian cookbooks. I normally just add meat. And that's not to be disrespectful to someone, but it's very hard to control your blood sugars on a purely vegetable-based diet. A lot of vegetarians don't eat enough vegetables anyway. They just generally eat lots of grains and stuff like that, not real vegetables. But as I said, there's no healthy populations that we're aware of that survive long term. And veganism is very closely linked with high cholesterol, and I'll explain why. But things like infertility, because you need the animal fats to make your sex hormones, your reproductive hormones. But again, these populations want to eat clean food as it would appear in nature. Take it one step further. They went to bed when it was dark. Their stress was intense for periods of time, but not much other stress. They weren't stressed like, will there be a car parking space? And, oh, the A13's closed. This is a modern stress. They get plenty of exercise. There'd be no sedentary person. There wouldn't be a person who's, you're retired, maybe you should calm down and move to a bungalow. It just wouldn't be the situation, People who are pregnant were still very active, very, very active.